The first thing that I just want to make sure that you guys realize is that when you're factoring, if you have the difference of cubes or the sum of cubes, that's what it equals. Then these are all for squares. These are factoring formulas. To solve for x, if you ever have anything with x squareds in it, so you would use it for this kind or this kind, you would use your quadratic. All right, here we go. So this is where we were from Friday. So this is part 2. The first thing is, remember what you had to do is you had to take that 3 and place it in for your x. So you would have had your 9 times 3 squared plus 11 times my 3. You're simply putting in that 3 in for your f of x, for your x value. And that would give you 114. Number 2, it literally says put in a 2 into your function of t in for the n. So you're literally putting in the 2 for your n. So you're going 2 times 2 plus 1, all divided by 2. Put that into your calculator, you get 3. That 2, just so you guys know, is off of the problem, not a square. Because that's divided by 2, so I know it's all the same color, but I just want to make sure you guys realize that. So it's literally, you're putting it 2 times 2 plus 1, all divided by 2. For number 3, it says you have if f of n is n squared and g of n is -7, it says to find g of f of -1. So the first thing you want to do is to plug in -1 in for your f function. So we're going to take and put that -1 into here. So I'm taking -1 and I'm squaring it. -1 squared is 1. So then I have to find g of 1. And g of 1 you're putting in your 1 in for your n of your g function, so you're literally taking -7 times my 1, which gives me a -7. So in number 3, find your g of f of n and g of f of g of n and g of f of n, and we found one of them, and then they ask, are they inverses? So yeah, Friday we found one, now today we'll find the other. So the first thing is, what is f of n? What is f of n? What is the function? What does f of n equal? N squared, right? F of n equals n squared. So you're going to go g of n squared, and then you have to take n squared and put it in for g. So you're putting it in there. So you're putting -7 in for, or we're putting in n squared in for my n. So we have -7 times n squared. And so you have -7 n squared. Questions? Tell them no. Nope. She knows. Number 6. It said to find the inverse of it. So it says to switch x and y first. So I'm going to switch x and y. So I'm going to say x equals 5y plus 10. And then it says to solve for y. So we are going to go and subtract 10. And I get x minus 10 is equal to 5y. Divide by 5. Then it says to replace y with our inverse function sign. So I'm going to have g of -1 of x is equal to your x minus 10 over 5. Remember, to be a function, it says which of these are functions. To be a function, what has to happen? It has to pass the vertical line test, hitting it only once. For the inverse to be a function, it has to pass the horizontal line test, and it only can hit it once. So, is this a function? No. And then it says, is its inverse a function? No. What about this one? Is this a function? Yeah. Is its inverse a function? Yes. D, we have here, is this a function? Yes. Is its inverse a function? No. Is this a function? Yep. Is its inverse a function? No. Questions? Biggest thing is, make sure you remember that if you draw a horizontal line and it hits more than once, its inverse is not a function. If you go up and down and it only hits once, it is a function. And that should make sense, because an inverse really is just taking your graph and moving it this many in that direction. So when you move it like that, you can clearly see that it would not have been a function anyways when you put its inverse. All right. Number 10, I don't remember which one on YouTube, so I'll just make sure I talk about it. Number 10, we have here this negative, flips it, so we have 5 over 4, and then we had to square both of them, so you have 5 squared, which gives you 25, and then 4 squared gives me 16 for the final answer. On this one, the first thing you do is you take that negative, so it flips it, so I have 1 over 121, and then I take it to the 1/2, which means the square root. So the square root of 1 is 1, and the square root of 121 is 11. If you're doing it with your calculator, make sure you put math fraction. All right, turn to your neighbor quickly and tell your neighbor how you are going to solve number 12. It says x to the 2/3 is equal to 25. All right. Okay, eyes and ears now. You are right. You raise both sides to the 3/2. So in your calculator, you are going to put 25 to the 3/2, and you should get 125. Make sure you put parentheses around that 2/3 or that 3/2. So the same thing happens when you do C. Or when you do 14, when you're solving for C, you will raise both sides to the 2/3, and you do get 16. 15, what do you do first? What's my first step? I add 6, so I'm going to add 6 to both sides. X plus 7 is equal to 10. Now what do I have to do?
Square both.
Square both sides. So I have x plus 7 is equal to 100. Minus 7. X equals 93. Alright, remember that we have two formulas, and if I were you, I'd make sure, if you do not already have them on your formula sheet, that you put those on. Your first formula for compounded, it was if it was n times a year, and this is compounded continuously. Number 17, it says a bank pays 5.75% compounded daily. So first of all, since it says compounded daily, are we using formula number 1 or formula number 2?
Uno.
Number 1 is right. So we're going to use this one. So we need to know what P is. P is the principal, the amount put in first. So P is 200. R was your interest, so it's 0.0575. N, number of times a year. So if it says daily, how many times a year is it doing it? 365. So N equals 365. And T, the amount of time. It says 4 or 5 years, so T is 5. Then you simply plug it in. So you have 200 times my 1 plus my 0.0575 over N, which is 365, to the NT. When you put it in your calculator, make sure you put parentheses around N and T. So you have 365 times 5 with the parenthesis around it. You should get 266.61. Yes.
What does E stand for?
E is your, it's like pi. It has a value, but it's right on your calculator. There's 2 spots. First spot is there, and the other spot is right there. But E, remember, is like 2 point something, and it's always. So E doesn't really stand for anything, but it's close. It's compounded continuously. All right. Explicit formula. It says find an explicit formula for the nth term of the geometric sequence. So I want you to take a second and think about what formula you're going to use and where you're going to find it. Hopefully all of you said it's the front side of the sheet, geometric, and if I were you, again, I would put explicit rule or equation or formula right off here so that you know that this is where you're using. So you're using G of n is equal to G1 times R to the n minus 1. So we're looking for a formula, so you want to keep G of n is equal to your first term, so it's 2. How do I find R? R equals what? Second divided by first. So it's 8 divided by 2. So it's 4. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. So it's times 4 to the n minus 1. So there's your answer. I didn't realize it until today that I actually copied this wrong, but it'll work out. But we're gonna finish it up to this 35. So I'm gonna do these, and then I'll leave you to do another page for tonight. All right. So 32. What the first thing is, make sure on your formula sheet you have law of sines and you have law of cosines. On the day of the test, if you ask me, hey, can I have the formula for anything? I'll say, sorry if you didn't write it down. That's, so make sure you do have it. So we have here, remember that you have sine of A over A, little a, is equal to sine of, yep, I sure can, thank you. Sine of big B over little b. Other one you have is little c squared is equal to little a squared plus little b squared minus 2ab cosine of big C. So those are your two formulas that you have when you do not have a right triangle, what you use. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to look at 32a and I want you to think to yourself, which one would you use, law of sines or law of cosines, to solve that out? The one you always want to start with is always law of sines. So since you have two angles and sides, you clearly can use the law of sines. And if you need this one, we can always find this angle right there. Since we are given 27, we do need this angle. So how can I find this angle? What do I take? Yeah, so we're going to go 180 minus my 40. I'm not sure what this number is, but I'm going to say it's 85 because that's what I used. Minus 85.
I used 83.
That's okay. That I know it's an 8 because it clearly goes down. So it's either 83 or 85, but I'm using 85. And that will equal my 55. All right. So we're going to go sine of 55 over 27 is equal to sine of 85 over x. Then I have to cross multiply. So I have x sine 55 is equal to 27 sine of 85. Last step is to divide by sine 55. So x is going to equal 32. And that's the side, so we leave it like that.
That's weird.
It's because with it being such a, like it's an angle, since this is an angle and it's only off by like 2 degrees, you're going to get approximately the same side. Yep. All right, we're going to do C next. Look at C and ask yourself, what one are you going to use? Are you going to use law of sines or law of cosines? Cosine is right. My question to you is, what is C? In the first one, you always want to start with big C. So what is my big C? On letter C, what is my big C? The only angle we're using is x. So big C is x. So that means little c is 8. So I'm going to go 8 squared is equal to, and remember I'm using it up from up there. So I'm using 8 squared is equal to, and then 11 and 5. So 11 squared plus 5 squared minus 2 times 11 times 5 cosine of x. When you are simplifying it, this is being added together, so we can put that into your calculator, but these are all being multiplied, so you can't put it all together. So you have here 8 squared is your 64. Ladies and gentlemen, shh. You have 11 squared plus 5 squared gives me 146 minus 2 times 11 times 5 gives you 110 cosine of x. Whenever you are solving for your x, you do your cosine, remember your second to last step has to be what? Dividing by. So remember that. This right here, if you need to, put a times there. So, because since there's nothing there, that means that these are being multiplied still. I'm going to subtract my 146 from both sides. I get negative 82 is equal to negative 110 cos of x divided by negative 110. So I'm going to get remember what it's got. Point something. 0.7 what? 4 cos of x. To solve for x, I have to do what? Cosine inverse. Pull it down. For what? B? I haven't done B. So I'm doing cos inverse. So cos inverse of 0.74. So x then, x on this one is equal to 42 degrees. All right. B, because we have on B, because we have just at one of the angles, we have to use law of cosines. So I'm actually going to turn my paper and I'm going to do it right here. All right. So it says to do, first of all, C obviously is 40, so little c is x. So I'm going to say x squared equals, I have 9 and 80, so I have 9 squared plus 80 squared minus 2 times 9 times 80 cos of 40. I would throw this all into your calculator at once, so you get x squared is equal to 5377. Then you take the square root of both sides. X is equal to 73.3. All right, 33A, I want you to take a moment and I want you to determine, is your answer on 33A going to be positive always, negative always, or positive or negative, like positive, negative, that it could be both positive and negative? For A. And why? It's on your paper.
I know.
Oh.
Is there another thing?
This is A. No, it's the square root of x to the 20th.
Okay.
All right. How many of you, raise your hand, how many of you think it's going to be positive always? How many of you think it's going to be negative always? How many of you think it's going to be positive or negative? How many of you don't know?
Yeah.
This is AL. Okay.
Yeah, but then nobody writes it.
Got like 4 more problems to do. Do you want me to call you when I get back or get done?
Well, no. X is negative. Yeah. Well, no. Then you get I.
Okay. Bye.
And then the
All right.
I to the 10th would be negative. It would still be.
Anytime underneath your radical it is to the even power, it's always going to be positive. Yeah. So if I were you, I'd write that down in your paper. So we have here, this is a 2 automatically, so you have x to the 20th divided by 2, which equals x to the 10, but absolute value of it. So make sure that you remember that if you have a 20 or something underneath it, that you're going to have the absolute value in your answer. So we have here 21 is underneath it. So when we have 21, if I take 21 divided by 3, you get what? 7. So we know that we had x to the 21 divided by your 3, which gives me x to the 7. But it could be either. It could be positive or negative, depending upon what x is. So we leave it just like that. Because if x was negative, your answer would have been negative. If x was positive, it would be positive. So you would leave it just like this. Without the absolute value sign, that means whatever x is, that's what it's going to be. How do I put in my calculator 121, the 5th root of it?
121 raised to 1/5.
Make sure you put 1/5 in parentheses, is right. and then you get 2.61. D is tricky. D is tricky. First of all, does 19 divide by 6 evenly? No. So that has to be broken up into the 6th root of x to the 18, right? And then x, because you're going to have x left over. So right here, is 18 positive, or is 18 even? Thank you. Is 18 even? Yes. And since 18 is even, when we take it out, that's going to be the absolute value. So we have absolute value of 18 divided by 6, which is 3. And then underneath, we still have our x. So the 6th root of x. So if you are taking an even amount out, make sure you remember that it's going to have the absolute value. E, we have negative 10 divided by 5 gives me, negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. When we are dividing, what do we do to the exponents? Subtract them. So I have 5 minus 1 gives me a 4. And then a 4/5 minus 1/5 gives me 3/5. That's the answer.
Yay! Woo! Hallelujah! Thank you, Paul. I am proud.
On 34, did you have a question? On 34, you are using these formulas. So 34, this is a perfect. So, and it has a negative, so you're using this formula right there. That's the formula we're using. So, take the square root of the first. So we have 5x. Square root of the last is 7. Same sign as the middle. This one says to give all solutions. So it is obviously a cube because it's z cubed and it has a minus, so we're going to use this one. And I see if I can show you both. So I am going to use the top. So it says to take the cube of the first, so I have z, the cube of the second, which gives me 3. And then we have here, it says to square the first, so I have z squared. Multiply them together, change the sign. So 3 times z is a negative 3, change the sign to a positive 3z. And then square the last. So I have 3 squared is 9, is equal to 0. It says to, it says right here, it says to give all solutions. So that means I have to set both of these equal to 0. So I have z minus 3 equal to 0, and then z squared plus 3z plus 9 is equal to 0. This one here, you add 3 to both sides. Z is equal to 3. How do I solve this? I can't factor it. What do I have to use? Quadratic. So I'm using the quadratic. It says negative b. So I have negative 3 plus or minus b squared. 3 squared is 9 minus 4a, which is 1, c, which is 9, all over 2a. So 2 times 1 is 2. Say it again. Then I'm going to simplify it, saying that we have up here, I'm going to go all the way up here so that we can have more room. So I have negative 3 plus or minus 9 minus my 36 is a negative 27 over 2. Negative 27, anytime you take the square root of a negative, what do we get? I. So I'm going to have negative 3 plus or minus I. And what can I break 27 up to? What's a perfect square?
Perfect square?
Yep, a perfect, so you can take the square root of it. 9 and 3. So, and that's all divided by 2. Final step is negative 3 plus or minus I. Square root of 9 is 3. So it should have been 3I, I'd write. Divide the, and then we have the square root of 3 all over 2.
No, it's not 2I. So just cross I.
Yeah, because it should be 3I. I put I first. It should be 3I.
Okay, negative 3.
So it'd be negative 3 plus or minus 3I square root of 3 over 2.
Right, that makes sense.
So tonight, or when we get done here, you're going to be doing the rest of this side. You're going to flip it over, and you're going to do it all the way up to this 29 is where I want you to get to. I'm going to give you guys a rundown really quickly of logs, and then you're going to be able to hopefully finish this, because 28 is what we did today. So the only thing different today is the logs. 19a, you simply throw it into your calculator. B and the rest of these logs are exponents, so you put it to equal to x. So remember, it's 4 is my base, x is my exponent, equals 1/16. Now some of you might be able to see that what x has to be right now. However, we're going to pretend we don't. So what do we have to do when x is in the exponent? What do we have to do to both sides? What's the cool thing about logs is you can take the log of both sides so that this guy can jump down. Yep. So we have x log 4 is equal to log of 1/16. And then I would simply divide by log 4. And x is equal to my negative 2. So that's exactly how you would do your ones right here. On 21a, if you have e, what do you take the both sides? You can't take the log, you take the natural log, ln of both sides. Still has the same rules. When you are writing an exponential form, remember that it is base, exponent, equals your answer. When you're writing it in logarithmic form, it's log, base, answer, equals your exponent, because logs are exponents. So your exponent is always on the other side of your equals. Alright, so with all of that, you should be able to go up to the 28 of this page. Tomorrow I will do the next all the way up to 28. So then on the next day I can hopefully finish it up. Questions? Alright.